Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today we're working with Society Papers. Dearest gentle beaders, this is Kate. What a gorgeous collection. Why don't we head down to the board, take a closer look and then make something together. So Kate is presented beautifully with this gorgeous, timelessly elegant ribbon tie at the top, and we also have a length of ribbon to work with that looks very complementary to the strand. Let's take a look at the strand itself. So how beautifully do these peaches and lilacs tone together with the gold metallics. I am so very excited to work with these. These are going to feature prominently with my work today, and I hope that you will enjoy. I just wanted you to see these strands before I cut them. Look at these little purple sparkly ones, they're so beautiful. So I'm going to share with you how to make this lovely Regency drop component, and you have 3 of these immense 2-way gold beads on the strand. They are absolutely stunning. So I've made 2 supplementary pieces which I'll string all together later on, and we're going to create one together right now with the exact same technique. So we're going to start with a 3-inch length of 14 gauge round wire. I'm working with a raw copper. It's a medium temper, and I'm going to try and get that to be as smooth and warm as possible. Now I'm working with a mandrel which is 15.8 millimeters, 0.62 of an inch apparently. What you need to do is to create a rounded form that is slightly larger than this beautiful golden 2-way bead we're working with. So we're going to use the wooden mandrel just to cross those ends over. Make sure you don't hurt yourself. Push those all the way around until you get this little crossover piece. Let's put the mandrel out the way. And what we're going to do with each of those ends is just curl them back and away. Now I'm going to be using my memory wire finishing pliers, and you may actually prefer to continue to use either your round form, your mandrel, your marker pen, whatever it is that you're using, just to help keep that round form. I'm using the smaller pin on my memory wire finishing pliers. You could use round nose standard pliers. And I'm going to start by just gripping the very end of that wire and rotating it away until I get the cut end of the wire to touch down on the continuous path like so. So if I just remove that out the way, you'll see that I've got 1 loop made already, and you can take that off, turn it around and do the exact same thing. Whichever hand is dominant for you, make your life as easy as possible. So again, I'm using the smaller side of my memory wire finishing pliers. I'm going to coerce the cut end to sit down on the next piece of wire where it's coming from. So rotate, pop those pliers out of the way and remove your mandrel, your marker pen, whatever it is you're using. Now these don't sit exactly in a line, and that's absolutely fine, because what I want to do is very gently extend just up at the top, and it's a very subtle little movement. Flip over to the other side, and I'm just pulling those apart ever so slightly. So we don't have a perfect round, we have a slightly elongated round form with those 2 loops sitting up at the top neatly. Now this is quite a firm wire to work with, so feel free to practice in a lighter wire. And I'm going to give it a teeny tiny little squish to make sure that it's nice and strong. You'll also notice I've left a gap between those 2 pieces. So let's pop that down for a moment. Now for my central feature, I'm going to use the large faceted rondelle. One of these feature 2-way beautiful golden metallic pieces. They're absolutely stunning. The reason I'm calling them 2-way is because you have an aperture from the top and also from side to side, so multiple ways you can use them. Now for my supplementary pieces, and these will go either side of the centerpiece on the finished necklet, which I will show you in just a moment, I'm also going to be using these bead caps and one of the little faux pearls in place of these 2 gorgeous faceted oversized rice beads with those beautiful step facets on. They're absolutely gorgeous. So the next thing I'm going to do is to bring in some 18 gauge round wire, and you need probably 10 inches for one of the larger pieces. Let's just give that a quick warm through and ensure that the end is flush cut. Let's just give that a quick snip back into the scrap pot. Now I am going to grab back my variation on round nose pliers, and I'm going to create a flat spiral. Now for my supplementary pieces I went for 2 loops. I'm going to go for 3 on this one because it's my central piece and I want it to hang down a little bit more than the 2 side pieces. So we're going to start by rotating around but not complete that circle before switching to my chain nose pliers to create a circular form. So I'm just going to push that into my non-dominant hand and very, very steadily and slowly just move this around until I have 3 passes of wire forming a coil. So I've gone for 2 so far. Let's add a 3rd because I want the central one to be a little bit more of a feature piece. I'll also show you another piece I made earlier, which sits as a single individual pendant on a necklet made from that beautiful fabric ribbon. So once we've got our 3 turns of wire for the central piece and 2 for either side, I'm just going to give that a little bit of a warm again. Switch my grip so that I can grab that wire about somewhere between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch away from that spiral, and draw the wire firmly back until it just sits gently underneath the edge of the spiral. And the reason I take it just a little bit further than I need to is because when I pull that away you get a really nice form and shape. So warming the next piece of wire as we move around, I'm going to grip very, very firmly and draw the elongated tail of wire all the way around. Just chase the shape of that lovely elegant drop. A lot of Regency jewellery features repeating designs, and it also features that teardrop shape. So let's just keep going until we start up on the side section, and you may need to just help coerce that to chase the line of the preceding piece of wire. Once you get up to the very top section, I'm just going to take that over the top gently, just a tiny amount, before gripping that wire just above the very, very top point and pulling it away at that classic 12 o'clock position. So let's have a look. I'm quite happy with that. Now, one of the things that I would do is, if I was going to create this to sell, is I would either wire these 2 sections together or I would give them a bit of a hammer. In this instance, I think I will hammer those, but I will do that a little bit later. So for the next bit to work adequately, we just need to ensure that this section of wire is nice and straight. On my side pieces, I added a single rice shape bead, but for this one I think I'm going to add a lovely floral bead cap from the strand, a huge faceted rondelle, another floral bead cap, and then let's see if this little lavender faux pearl sits on top. It does beautifully. We're just going to pop this down for a second, and we're going to grab in some 3-inch scrap now of 24 gauge wire. This is round wire in a medium temper, and I'm going to pick up that little elegant horseshoe shape that we created earlier. I'm just going to put the finer wire over the top, grip it into position. It's around about equal sides either side, and I'm going to wrap 3 or 4 times around one of those edges. You may like to use your pliers to give you a hand. This is a slightly stronger wire than I would normally use for weaving and wrapping. I'd normally use a 26 gauge, but this forms part of the tutorial strength. So that's gone for 4 wraps. So I think that will be adequate in this wire. If I flip that over to the rear side and just trim that excess section away, pop it in the scrap pot, and then make sure that that tail sits down neatly and that coil is neat and tidy as well. If I draw that back to the front side, what I want to have is the finer wire over the top of that little horseshoe. 4 very neat and tidy wraps all tightened up. and the cut end of the wire to be inside. So the reason I was so very excited by these beads is because we have an opportunity to use two different apertures. So we're going to go through from side to side. Once the bead is sitting relatively equally, we're going to take that tail all the way around the outside of that little horseshoe shape, draw that up inside. Now you can allow the bead to spin if it helps you out. I actually prefer to hold the bead in position so that I can keep a really firm grip on the whole thing, pull that wire firmly through. Now at the moment that's flipped upside down, so let's just turn that back over the other way. There is a difference in the design, and I like those two little eye-like appearances to be higher and closer to the loops. So you can adjust that at any point in time whilst you're doing this part of the design. So let's go for that fourth wrap. We've got to go one more time all the way around, tighten that coil up. Again, we're going to flip this to the rear side. Once you get really close in there with your flush cutters, just give yourself a little tiny extra bit so that you can tuck that neatly away inside that horseshoe shape. So very delicately close up those wires, make sure everything's neat and tidy. Now we're going to bring these two pieces together. So what you will find is that you need to ensure your wire is warm and straight, and that your bead is the correct way up. This is the front of my design because the finer gauge wire is sitting over the front, therefore the golden piece is slightly more elevated. So let's pop the tail of that other piece of wire we just worked with a second ago all the way up and through. It's a little bit tricky with the camera in the way, but you can indeed get that to come out of the top. So that is what our central piece is going to look like, but what we want to do is to secure everything together. So let's pop this down for just a second. I have now another scrap length of 24 gauge wire. This is about 4 inches. You probably won't need it all, but it's better to have too much. I'm going to grip this on the post that's gone up through that golden feature bead, and I'm going to wrap that around a couple of times just to get a grip on it. That's 3 times, because what I want to have are 6 rotations. I just need to turn this over the other way so that I can take that tiny tail of wire and just get that to tuck away neatly. So 6 rotations I think is what I'm looking for here. It's certainly what I did on the other pieces. Once you've rotated that all the way around tightly, we're going to scooch those wires so that they're very neat and tidy. I'm going to draw this back into my preferred orientation of holding, and then I'm going to push this wire all the way down in between those 2 loops at the top. And then what we're going to do, let me move those over slightly, is bring the tail of that wire up through the loop that's furthest away from me, all the way through, nice and firmly. And then we're looking to align the lighter 18 gauge wire directly between the 2 heavy 14 gauge loops. Then we're going to take the tail and post it down through the loop that is closest to you. Let's pull that firmly into position, and we're looking for the central wire to be immediately between the 2 loops. Push the tail up through, all the way over the top, and now we can get some tension. So let's start bringing everything together. I'm going to very softly push that little wrap down so that it sits neatly, and I'm going to go for a second wrap. It's come up through the loop furthest away from me, down through the loop nearest to me, and I'm just putting my nail over that first wrap so that those 2 wraps will sit side by side. Once you've got those 2 wraps neatly, you've got a section of wire that's just come underneath that core, and all we're going to do is finish off by wrapping 6 times on that core wire, 5 and 6. Take that to the rear side and then scooch it down neatly. So if I can find my flush cutters, I've abandoned them somewhere, trim that away. Let's just flip that over to the rear side and smush that wire down smoothly. And you can see that we have a central piece that represents those 2 side pieces. So as I mentioned earlier, Jewellery for the Regency period featured a lot of repeating designs and a lot of drop shapes. So I'm going to finish off with a teeny tiny wrapped loop up at the top, just making sure that all of my wraps here are very, very neat. Make sure that your beads underneath that golden disc sit exactly where you want them. And then I'm going to push the wire forwards at 90 degrees. And I'm going to use the smaller side again on my memory wire finishing pliers just to create a teeny tiny loop. Pull that all the way round, and then we're going to support that loop whilst we wrap this tail 3 times around that central core section to make sure you don't pull it out of shape, and then a third wrap, take it to the rear side, tidy that up so it's nice and straight. Let's trim away. There we are. And then you can just take a second to get that nice and neat and tidy, making sure that you smush that last little bit of the tail of the wire down flat. And then you've got your central piece. And in just a second, I shall thread all this together to make the Kate Regency drop necklet. Here you can see I've added short lengths of ribbon to complete the Kate necklet, and I've also created a second piece in the similar design utilising these beautiful sparkly clay beads. It's the same basic technique. I hope that you've enjoyed this from Society Papers, and this is Kate.